Darwin's theory of sexual selection. So this is Darwin, 1871. And it's one of the most brilliant and then unrecognized evolutionary theories in existence. So most people, when they think about evolution, they think about survival of the fittest, nature red in tooth and claw, and of course that's really what Darwin's first book on the origin of species was all about. Survival, adaptations to survival. And he came up with this brilliant phrase called the hostile forces of nature, and that organisms have these adaptations to deal with these hostile forces of nature in order to survive. So there were basically threats from the environment, things like you fall off a cliff, you drown in the ocean, food shortages, threats from predators, the lions and tigers and bears, threats from parasites that can eat you from within. And so that's really what his first book was all about. And so people equated natural selection with survival selection. But there were, in fact, phenomena that Darwin could not explain on this theory. And he was very troubled by them. He noticed that something that all scientists do, scientists develop fondness for their pet hypotheses, right, their pet theories. And so, but he noticed that he had a tendency to forget facts that were inconsistent with his theory of natural selection. And so he forced himself to write them down in a separate notebook because he didn't want to forget them. He was, so one was like the brilliant plumage of peacocks. And he asked, how could this weird structure possibly lead to a survival advantage? It's like, first of all, metabolically expensive. And it's like a neon sign to predators advertising fast food. How could this weird structure possibly have evolved? He even said in his notebook that the sight of a peacock gives me nightmares. And he also noticed other phenomena, sexual dimorphism, differences in the size, shape, morphology of males and females of the same species. And the reason this troubled him was because he thought, well, both sexes face the same survival problems, right? Both sexes have to eat, both sexes have to fend off predators, both sexes have to fend off parasites. So why would they differ in morphology, size, strength, etc.? And moreover, why would different species vary so dramatically? So you have like elephant seals, for example. Males are 4 times the size of females. Chimpanzees, less so, twice the size of females. Humans, it's complicated because it depends on which aspect of morphology you're talking about. So men are only, say, 10%, 11% taller than women, but things like upper body strength, it's like monumentally powerful sex differences there. And so all this is a long-winded way of saying that in response to these anomalies, things like the brilliant plumage of peacocks, the elaborate bird song, and so forth, and the sex differences, he came up with the theory of sexual selection. And sexual selection deals not with the evolution of characteristics that lead to survival advantage, but rather those characteristics that lead to a mating advantage. So he identified 2 causal pathways, which are still the pillars of sexual selection theory, by which a mating advantage could occur. Okay, one is intrasexual competition or same-sex competition. So battles, the stereotype is 2 stags locking horns in combat, and the victor gains sexual access to the female. A loser ambles off with a broken antler, dejected, suffering low self-esteem, and needing psychotherapy from some of my clinical psychology colleagues, mate value rehabilitation therapy or something like that. And so the logic was very simple but very clear, and that is that qualities that led to success in these same-sex battles, what biologists call contest competition, those got passed on in greater numbers because of the sexual access that the victors gained. Qualities associated with losing the competition basically bit the evolutionary dust. And the logic of that intrasexual competition is actually more general. So what I've described is what's called contest competition, where there's a literal physical battle, but it's more general in that, for example, with humans, we sometimes do contest competition. In fact, there's somewhat of a long evolutionary history of males doing these physical contests in warfare and sometimes within groups. But we also compete for status. And for competing for status gives you a mating advantage, but we don't necessarily have to fight. So I always say, like, I teach at University of Texas, and all the time, and I've previously taught at University of Michigan, Harvard University, Berkeley. In all my years in academia, I've never walked across campus and one time seen two guys duking it out, in public, surrounded by a ring of females who are watching to see who's going to be the winner, and then having sex with the winner. Not once have I observed this. Maybe they do it in private, but I haven't seen that. So that's the first component, is same-sex competition. Second process is intersexual selection, which is means between the sexes. So it's basically preferential mate choice. And there, the issue is, what are the qualities that men and women, or males and females, desire in the opposite sex? And the logic there is that you need some variability in those qualities, and so they could be anything. They could be physical appearance, they could be sense of humor, they could be intelligence, they could be personality characteristics. So first, there has to be variability. Second, there has to be some heritability to the variability. And then third, there has to be some consensus. It doesn't have to be total, but some agreement on what qualities are desired. And so, for example, just hypothetically, if it were the case that all women preferred to mate with men who had red hair, okay, it actually doesn't occur. Redhead is not typically a dominant preference, but if they did, then over time you would see an increase in the frequency of redheadedness in the population, because those with red hair would have a mating advantage. They would be selectively chosen. Those lacking red hair would be, kind of banished, or do less well on the mating market. And so again, you can see evolution, which simply means change over time, either due to qualities that lead to same success in same-sex battles, or due to possessing qualities that are valued by the opposite sex.